Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere cold candlelit and a little too obsessed with noseworts. You're inside a castle, not a romantic turreted one, but a chilly gray stone fortress tucked deep in the German Rhineland. Outside, a thin mist curls over the ground like it's eavesdropping. Inside, the fire sputters. The tapestries don't warm the place much, and you're pretty sure one of them is watching you. You're standing in the winter of 1560. The air stinks faintly of boiled leather tallow candles and someone's lunch, probably salted herring. A servant scurries past, avoiding your eyes as muffled sobs echo faintly from behind a wooden door. Welcome to the court of Prince Bishop Johann von der Leyen. If the name sounds friendly, don't get too comfortable. He's not exactly the puppies and parades kind of prince. No, Johann has recently taken a strong personal interest in purifying his domain. And by purifying, we mean accusing dozens, soon to be hundreds of people of witchcraft and hauling them off to trial. Now, you might wonder, wasn't Johann supposed to handle boring prince stuff like taxes, grain shortages, and papal correspondence? Yes. But witch hunting, it turns out, fits conveniently into a prince's day job, especially if he believes that demons are nesting under every cobblestone, or worse, inside his own citizens. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you listening from and what time is it there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk deeper into the castle past iron sconces dripping wax like tears. In the great hall, the hearth is going, but it doesn't feel warm. Two guards in red tunics talk in hushed tones. On the wall, a portrait of Johann painted too handsomely for reality. In the image, he holds a book in one hand, a shepherd's crook in the other. Symbolism, he guides his flock. Reality, he's guiding them straight into the pyres. Tonight, you're a curious visitor, one no one notices. You observe, wander, listen. Think of yourself as history's sleepiest time traveler. And this particular evening is more than a little tense. The trial of a woman named Annalise is set for dawn. She was accused by her neighbor of bewitching his pigs, which is either an agricultural crime or an oddly specific insult. No one's laughing. You pass by the chapel. The candles are fresh. The incense smells like burned flowers and old paper. You catch snippets of Latin muttering and the wet sniffle of someone kneeling too long. Even Faith feels afraid tonight. Historians agree this era, and especially this region of Germany, experienced one of Europe's worst witchcraft panics. In some towns, half the female population was accused at some point. What started as a few suspicious glances turned into roaring fires and public hangings. The frenzy lasted decades, and yes, some of it was political. When Protestantism fractured the Catholic world, it didn't just split churches, it cracked open whole communities. Prince bishops like Johann, nominally both secular rulers and spiritual shepherds, saw themselves as defenders of orthodoxy. Any deviation, whether doctrinal or herbal, could be labeled heresy or worse, witchcraft. And if that sounds a little over the top, you're not wrong. But remember, this was a world where storms wrecking your crops might not just be bad weather, they might be witch weather. And if your wife miscarried or your cow stopped giving milk, there had to be someone to blame. You stop in front of a storeroom, inside sacks of grain wheels of cheese, and a crate marked with chalk hexanactin, witch files. Johann has been keeping them. Dozens. Probably more. Want a quirky detail? Some of the files include evidence like dried lizard skins, oddly shaped potatoes, and this one's real, an onion that sings at night. No one ever explains whether it's in tune. Still, historians argue whether Johann truly believed in witches or simply found a useful tool in the hysteria. Was he paranoid, zealous, opportunistic? Maybe all three. That ambiguity, the gap between what he believed and what he wanted others to believe, will be something you'll feel as we go. A tension that lingers like that candle wax on your sleeve. You stand quietly in a stone corridor. A breeze whistles through a slit window. Somewhere a bell tolls the 9th hour. You feel the story winding itself around you, and you've only just begun. You hear the footsteps before you see him, measured, deliberate, softened by worn leather soles. Then around the corner comes Johann von der Leyen, Prince Bishop of Trier. He's younger than expected, maybe 40. His jaws clean-shaven, his eyes slightly sunken, like someone who squints too much at candlelight or policy scrolls. His cloak is velvet lined with fur, though it seems he'd rather wear armor if it were allowed at Mass. You're in the company of a man who wakes up thinking about salvation and goes to bed thinking about executions. He doesn't look cruel, not exactly. His expression is one of purpose, a strange, chilly confidence. You can imagine him hosting a banquet with one hand while signing a death warrant with the other. And in fact, that's not far from how he's running things. Johann wasn't born a bishop. He trained in law and canon doctrine, rising steadily through the ranks of the church and the Holy Roman bureaucracy. Like many second sons of noble families, he wasn't meant to inherit land or armies, so he inherited souls instead. A theological mind, ambitious and well-connected, exactly the kind of person who could blur the line between courtroom and confessional. It's the mid-1500s, and Trier is one of the prince-bishoprics of the empire. That's right, Johann's not just the local bishop, he's also the secular ruler of the land. His power covers courts, taxes, roads, and unfortunately, for many a growing obsession with rooting out evil by any means necessary. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Under Johann's rule, Trier became one of the deadliest epicenters of witch trials in all of Europe. More than 300 people, many of them women, were executed on charges of witchcraft during his tenure. And that's just the confirmed list. You follow him now through a long hallway of portraits. These are his predecessors, some scowling in papal red, others looking vaguely surprised to be immortalized in oil. Johann walks past them briskly. He's not here to admire lineage. He has an appointment with a confession. The door he enters leads to a private receiving room. One thick table, 2 chairs, a crucifix nailed above a small fireplace. There's a ledger, open a quill, freshly dipped in ink. This is where he works, where he gathers, reports, meets with inquisitors, and listens to the fearful stories of villagers who come crawling in eyes, darting, clutching trinkets and rumors. One of Johann's innovations, if you can call it, that was the formalization of informant reports. Instead of merely responding to mass hysteria, he institutionalized it. Villagers were encouraged to report odd behavior. A cow that refused to be milked. A woman who walked alone at night. A man who healed a fever with tea instead of prayer. Historians still argue whether Johann truly believed these signs to be satanic, or whether he was simply tightening his grip on the region. After all, a terrified populace is a manageable one. And when the church supports your efforts and local rivals fear you well, witch hunting starts to look awfully convenient. You peer closer at the ledger. One entry stands out: Brunhilde M., aged 61, widow, said to converse with birds, suspected of spoiling grain stores, smells of vinegar. Now, let's pause a second. Smells of vinegar in a world without deodorant, indoor plumbing, or refrigeration. That's not witchcraft, that's Wednesday. Still, for Johann, these little details formed patterns. Patterns led to accusations. Accusations led to trials. And trials, well, let's just say, he didn't build extra jail cells. Quirky tidbit time, Johann's court sometimes employed testers, individuals who would poke suspects with sharp needles to find the infamous witch's mark, a supposedly insensitive spot on the body that wouldn't bleed. These tests were about as scientific as flipping a coin, but messier. You look at the tools on his table: a small silver-tipped stylus, wax seals, a bell to summon guards, a wooden cross with a chip on one edge, all arranged neatly. This isn't a madman's lair. It's a bureaucrat's sanctum, which somehow makes it worse. There's a knock at the door. A young priest enters, robes rustling. He hands Johann a folded parchment. More names, probably. Another whisper from the town square, or a jealous rival finally finding the courage to denounce a midwife with suspiciously effective herbs. The priest bows low and backs out. Johann doesn't look up. He's already making notes in the margin, as if deciding someone's eternal fate is just another line item on his afternoon list somewhere between Inspect Abbey Roof and attend Vespers. And you stand there invisible but present, watching a man become something monstrous without ever raising his voice. There's no cackling here, no wild-eyed fanaticism, just quiet conviction and an unshakable belief that he is saving souls by destroying lives. You begin to understand this isn't a story of madness. It's a story of calm clerical efficiency turned against the vulnerable. And it's just beginning. You trail Johann down another corridor, this one darker, lower ceilinged and lined with weathered oak doors. He moves like a man with a plan, though his hands stay clasped behind his back fingers, twitching slightly with thought. You're descending now deeper into the castle's belly. The scent of damp stone intensifies, laced with the faint, acrid sting of old oil and iron. Eventually, you reach a door flanked by two guards in rough wool tunics. One glances sideways as Johann nods curtly. The other unlocks the door with a heavy iron key that clinks like the opening bars of a dirge. Inside is a narrow chamber, almost cozy if you ignore the atmosphere. There's a chair, a table, a small brazier glowing faintly in the corner. On the wall hangs a polished crossbow, its bolts lined neatly below. Yes, a crossbow. Nothing says, "Let's talk theology," like a loaded weapon. This is Johann's planning room, not his audience chamber, not his chapel. It's where he meets with his inner circle, where scrolls are unrolled and names debated, where policy bleeds into paranoia. And on the desk before you, parchment maps marked villages, circled houses, dots representing suspects, maybe even executions. It's a witch-hunting war room. Tonight, Johann is joined by two men. The first is lean, sharp-nosed, and carries himself like a man who drinks vinegar for breakfast. His name is Father Conrad, a Dominican theologian who believes the devil lurks in left-handed people, and that sneezing without a prayer is practically an invitation to demonic possession. The second is more unexpected, an ex-soldier named Ulrich, turned inquisitor. His armor's gone, but his boots are still military grade. He never smiles. He reads confessions like battlefield reports. Together, this trio forms the brains behind Johann's campaign. One quotes scripture, one interrogates suspects, and Johann signs the orders. You sit in on tonight's conversation. The case: a peasant girl named Lisi, age 17, orphaned, tends goats, accused by three neighbors of summoning a storm that killed several pigs and blew shingles off the chapel roof. Her crime: singing to herself during the thunder and owning a cat. Obviously a familiar. Johann strokes his chin as Ulrich reports: no known family, sleeps in the hay barn, refused confession, claimed innocence. Father Conrad sighs, a sign of pride that the devil makes them bold. You watch as the trio debates. The language is calm, even academic. Terms like maleficium and pactum cum diabolo are tossed around like they're part of a dinner menu. No one raises their voice, but the outcome is already tilting one direction. Here's your mainstream historical fact. 16th century witch hunting was often incredibly organized. It wasn't mobs with pitchforks, it was courts, officials, records, and procedures. Yes, there was torture, but first there was paperwork. So much paperwork. And yes, this was very much a day job. Rulers like Johann saw it as part of their spiritual duty, cleansing evil from their lands, protecting souls from corruption. It all fit neatly beside road repairs and tax levies. That's what makes it chilling how routine it became. The quirky detail: some German witch hunters, including Johann's circle, genuinely believed demons entered through cheese. Not all cheese, of course, mainly soft, moldy kinds. The theory was that spoiled dairy could ferment demonic influence. So, yes, brie was briefly considered unholy. As Ulrich pulls out a list of past confessions from similar cases, Father Conrad cross-references passages from Malleus Maleficarum, the infamous witch hunter's manual. Johann, meanwhile, is sketching a plan. He proposes a visit to Lisa's village unannounced. Quiet observation. Maybe set a trap with a borrowed goat. Yes, really. Historians still argue whether Johann's tactics were strategic genius or just paranoid theater. Some say his planning room tactics reflect genuine counter-espionage thinking. Others call it pure delusion. Either way, the effect was real. Villagers whispered, children stopped singing, cats vanished. You take a step closer to the table, noting a small figurine tucked behind the parchment rolls. It's carved from bone, vaguely human, with one eye gouged out. A charm, a trophy. No one mentions it. Johann finally speaks. If the girl confesses, we'll go no further. If she doesn't, he lets the sentence trail off. No one needs him to finish. The meeting ends. The candles burn low. Ulrich and Conrad file out silently. Johann stays behind, staring at the map for a long while. His breath fogs slightly in the cold air. You watch as he traces a line between villages, planning his next move. You realize with a shiver that this is all ordinary to him. A Tuesday maybe, mid-morning business, strategy over lunch, and the crossbow still hanging untouched but not forgotten. You slip out behind Johann, your ghostly footsteps echoing slightly down the stairwell as he ascends toward the upper library. The stone beneath your feet is uneven from centuries of passing boots, some armored, some bare. You know where he's going, even before he gets there. He's heading to consult with a man even more obsessed with demons than he is. You arrive in the scriptorium, a long arched hall stuffed with manuscripts, chained tomes, and enough candle smoke to coat your lungs in wax. Dust hangs visibly in the air, swirling like trapped souls. You spot him immediately, a man hunched over a leather-bound book quill in one hand, fingers stained with ink and something suspiciously green. This is Heinrich Klaust, a lay demonologist and former apothecary who gave up selling cough syrup to study infernal patterns. In other words, he reads signs, interprets omens, and claims that sneezing more than twice in a row invites minor demons into your spleen. He's also Johann's unofficial consultant on all things devilish. Your Grace Heinrich says, without looking up, the goat girl fits the third pattern. Johann raises an eyebrow. Third Heinrich nods solemnly. Singing, animal affinity, pre-storm behavior. It's textbook. He taps a diagram, something resembling a starfish, holding a spoon which he insists represents a lower-level weather demon. You settle in behind a crumbling column and watch as Heinrich pulls out what he calls the Codex of Burning Truths. It's an illustrated guide to demon species, many of which seem suspiciously like common illnesses with horns. One entry features a creature whose chief sin is making cows miscarry and inspiring bad rhymes. Mainstream historical fact, demonologists were not rare in the late 16th century. As the Protestant Reformation fractured Europe, the Catholic Church doubled down on spiritual science. Books like Malleus Maleficarum were bestsellers, and every prince with a court wanted an expert in decoding diabolical symbols, even if half the symbols came from wine stains. Quirky tidbit. Some demon hunting manuals claimed Satan had a tail shaped like a goose feather, which was why he often whispered sins during sleep, because feathers, as everyone knows, make you dream weird things. That's theology, apparently. Johann listens intently as Heinrich proposes a test place, a blessed loaf of bread, near the girl's home. If it molds overnight, she's guilty. If rats eat it, she's more guilty. If it remains untouched, the spirits are withholding a sign which still means guilty. Historians still argue whether people like Heinrich believed their own nonsense. Was he a true believer or a con artist? Some scholars suggest Heinrich's notes show genuine conviction. Others point out that he once accused a rooster of having the eyes of Beelzebub. As they discuss, you move to the window. Below, the village stretches out under a thick gray sky. The air is heavy. Somewhere, a cow moos nervously, as if aware of the rising theological tension. Behind you, Heinrich launches into a story about a demon that lives in mirrors and can only be banished by spitting into your left shoe. Johann hums politely, jotting something in his ledger. Probably buy new shoes. This is how decisions are made. With charts, with flour-dusted maps, with men drawing invisible battle lines between angels and barn animals. And yet it works if you define works as setting a region on fire with terror. Heinrich pulls out one last item, a scroll of known witch foods. He reads aloud black mushrooms honey that crystallizes too quickly any bread baked on a Tuesday, and for some reason stew that cools unevenly. Johann chuckles softly at that last one. You realize it's the first time you've heard him laugh. It's not reassuring. The meeting ends with a mutual nod. Heinrich returns to his ink and diagrams. Johann returns to his plans. And you return to the hallway, where the smell of candle grease now makes your stomach turn. It's all so neat, so organized. One man charts the realm of demons, another draws the roads to justice, and the rest, they're just living under this sky, hoping their bread molds the right way. You step into the town square of a small village just outside Trier, one of those clustered hamlets nestled among damp woods and crooked fences. The roofs are thatched, the wells creak, and nearly every window has its shutters drawn, even though it's barely past noon. You've followed Johann's delegation here, traveling with minimal fanfare and maximum suspicion. This isn't just a pastoral stroll, it's an inspection. Two horses snort impatiently beside the inn where the prince's aides are resting, but Johann doesn't pause. He strides directly toward the magistrate's home, flanked by Ulrich and a clerk with a pouch of inkpots bouncing on his hip. The town elders emerge slowly from the chapel, their faces carefully composed, neither welcoming nor hostile, just cautious, like people trying to guess the weather from a single gust of wind. This is how witchcraft becomes policy. You watch the greeting unfold. Bows are exchanged. Hands are not shaken. Everyone knows why Johann is here. A recent death, the baker's wife, has stirred whispers. She fell ill suddenly, and her body was reportedly found with a strange pattern on her feet. The pattern just frostbite. But once someone said the word curse, it spread faster than the illness ever did. In Johann's world, that's enough to begin. Mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1500s, accusations of witchcraft had moved from spontaneous village gossip to formal municipal procedure in many parts of Germany. Councils under pressure from religious and secular authorities began recording complaints, identifying suspects, and even allocating budgets for investigations. Yes, budgets, as in line items for ropes, ink, and firewood. Johann enters the magistrate's home. Inside, the furnishings are modest: a few stools, a rough table, and a fire kept alive, mostly for show. The clerk spreads his scrolls while Johann listens to a local elder describe unnatural events: a cow born with two tongues, soup that wouldn't boil, and an apple tree that flowered in winter. Most of this can be explained. Some of it can't. But none of it matters to Johann. He isn't here to debate nature. He's here to assert control. Outside, villagers hover like ghosts. You wander among them. One old man mutters that the priest's sermons have grown darker lately. A young woman clutching a jug of milk insists she's prayed double since Candlemas. Even the children are subdued, staring up at the delegation like it might sprout claws. Then you spot her Lisa, 17 red cloak eyes like smoke over ash. She's crouched beside the well, pretending to rinse her hands, but you can tell she's listening. She already knows. The way her shoulders tighten when Johann's name is spoken. The way she doesn't look up when Ulrich walks by. This isn't new to her. You remember, she sings to goats, talks to herself, and once returned a loaf of bread to the baker, claiming it had the wrong wind in it. None of that is illegal. And yet, quirky tidbit: in some German villages, wine direction was considered part of moral judgment. A child born during an east wind might be unlucky. A cake that rose too fast in a west wind definitely touched by demons. The magistrate now presents the petition from townsfolk. It's just a list of names and accusations written in multiple hands, some barely legible. Johann reads slowly, nodding once. Ulrich marks two names with a black cross. Lisa's is one of them. Historians still argue whether these village petitions were coerced, spontaneous, or quietly orchestrated. In some cases, documents show multiple drafts suggesting that community leaders rewrote accusations to meet legal thresholds, which is to say, people were editing each other's paranoia. The clerk begins recording witness statements. No one names themselves. Most begin with, "I heard," or "she was seen." And when Johann asks, "Did you confront her?" the answer is always, "No, I was afraid." Afraid of what, Lisa? Or of not being afraid enough? As evening falls, a cart is prepared. Lisa is led from her home quietly. No resistance. Just a final glance back at her goats, who bleat once and go silent. No chains. Just a ride to Trier for examination. Everyone pretends this is fair, legal, righteous. You know better. Johann mounts his horse. No triumph, no fury. Just another entry in his ledger, another dot on the map. You remain behind as the village slips into stillness, the kind that feels like waiting, because they know he'll be back. Snow has begun to fall, not the soft, festive kind, but the kind that blows sideways sharp flakes that sting your cheeks like whispered warnings. You're back in Trier, now standing beneath the frosted eaves of the Prince Bishop's Tribunal Hall. Inside, a fire snaps and crackles, but it doesn't chase away the chill. The cold here isn't just weather, it's expectation. You watch as Lisa is led through a narrow side door flanked by two guards. Her red cloak is gone. In its place, a plain woolen shift. Her hair, once tied back, now hangs loose. Not by choice, someone must have unpinned it. She looks smaller now, not younger, just more distant, like she's already fading from the world she still stands in. The accusation in full is absurd, causing an unnatural frost, whispering curses to goats and summoning unseasonable clouds. The evidence shoe prints found in the snow prints that allegedly began at her barn, but had no return trail. She vanished into the air, one villager swore. More likely, the snow just covered the prints overnight. But logic isn't the currency here. Mainstream historical fact one-way footprints were often cited as evidence of witchcraft across early modern Europe. People believed witches could transform into animals or ride wind spirits to flee scenes of their crimes. If someone disappeared in the snow without tracks leading back, that was enough to spark suspicion, or more often, accusations. Lisa is brought before a table where three men sit, Johann Ulrich, and a local canon judge whose spectacles keep fogging up. A clerk scribbles noisily in the corner. The atmosphere is formal but tense. Lisa doesn't speak until spoken to. When asked her name, she replies calmly. When asked if she has a cat, she nods once. Brune. That alone draws a sharp intake of breath from the canon. Why do you speak to it? Ulrich asks. Lisa blinks. Because it listens. Wrong answer. The clerk's pen doesn't even pause. You sit beside the hearth, invisible but aware. You can feel the tightening of the room like wool stretching over a too small frame. Lisa is questioned about the snow. She answers plainly, "It snowed. I was home." They ask why she sang during the storm. To calm the goats. And why she boiled rosemary. For a sore throat. But each answer sounds somehow like a deeper confession because once you're accused, everything becomes evidence. Quirky tidbit. In several German territories, owning a rosemary bush was enough to raise eyebrows. It was thought to be a scented lure for demonic energies, especially when boiled. The logic being anything that soothed illness without prayer had to come from the devil's medicine chest. Ulrich leans in. Do you renounce the devil? Lisa furrows her brow. I've never met him. Silence. A dangerous answer. Historians still argue whether these trials were about belief or performance, whether people like Lisa were truly judged on actions or on how convincingly they denied them. The difference could mean life or death. Smile too little cold. Too much mocking. Speak too softly guilty. Too loudly guilty with confidence. A murmur passes through the room as Johann rises. He walks slowly to the table where the evidence has been laid out. A kerchief with ash on it, a doll found near the well, and a pair of shoes, Lisa's still damp from the snow, displayed like relics. He lifts one shoe delicately, then turns it over. There, scratched faintly into the leather, is a spiral. Explain this, he says. Lisa squints. It's just how I mark my things. Ulrich interjects. It's a rune, pagan. It's a swirl, Lisa replies flatly. I was bored. A beat of silence. Then Johann speaks not to her, but to the room. She will be detained for examination. 3 days. If by then she confesses, we proceed. If not, she is placed under sacred trial. That means torture, just not yet. The hearing ends. The fire dies down. Lisa is led away. She doesn't cry. Not because she's brave, but because she's already learned that fear is now another thing that can be used against her. You walk beside her down the corridor. The snow has stopped, but the cold lingers. Outside, the only footprints in the courtyard are hers. 3 days pass. Or perhaps it's longer time inside the tribunal's detention chamber doesn't behave like time in the world above. You descend now into the lower halls of Trier Castle, where the stone walls sweat, and the torchlight never quite touches the ceiling. The smell is ancient mildew lye, and something sour that clings to cloth and skin alike. You reach the examination room where Lisa has been held. It's not a dungeon exactly. There's no rack, no whips hung for display. Just a plain wooden bench, a slanted table, and a bucket of water gone lukewarm. But that's what makes it worse, the clinical quiet, the dry efficiency. Ulrich is already there, sleeves rolled up, eyes unreadable. He doesn't relish the work. He doesn't dread it either. To him, this is procedure an unpleasant but necessary mechanism in the service of truth. Or at least what he's been trained to believe truth looks like. Lisa's seated wrists loosely bound in front. She hasn't slept. The smudges beneath her eyes aren't from weeping. They're from the soot of the torch brackets and the dust of long hours alone. Ulrich begins with a prayer, not a comforting one, but a formal invocation, asking God to drive falsehood from flesh and lead the stubborn heart to confession. Then he begins the questioning. Slowly. Have you met with Satan? No. Do you deny knowing witches? I know women, not witches. Have you flown? Lisa hesitates. What does that mean? Ulrich makes a mark. Mainstream historical fact, interrogations during witch trials often used leading questions that presumed guilt. The purpose wasn't to discover whether someone was a witch, but rather how they were a witch. Denial wasn't taken as innocence, it was viewed as proof the devil had hardened your heart. But not all sessions began with torture. In fact, the church demanded evidence be collected before instruments could be used. So men like Ulrich would try verbal exhaustion first, confuse the suspect, repeat questions, mix scripture with accusation until reality began to dissolve. And here comes the quirky tidbit. One of the standard truth tests involved asking the suspect to recite the Lord's Prayer backwards. Not just difficult, near impossible for most villagers who couldn't read. Failure to do so was seen as definitive proof of satanic interference. Ulrich leans forward now. He's pulled out the stylus, a thin brass needle used to test for the infamous witch's mark, a spot where the devil allegedly kissed or branded his servants. It could be a mole, a freckle, a birthmark, or more often a simple patch of dry skin. "Lift your sleeve," he says. Lise obeys, her eyes fixed somewhere above his head. Ulrich presses gently along her forearm. She flinches, but not at pain at the indignity. Here he murmurs, touching a bruise. "How did you get this?" "I bumped the door." "Does it feel pain?" "Of course." He notes it down anyway. Historians still argue whether witch prickers like Ulrich believed in what they did. Some certainly did. Others simply wanted to keep their jobs. The line between faith and professional obligation was often smudged by fear money and social expectation. Lise is asked again about the shoe print in the snow. She repeats herself. Her voice grows hoarse. Ulrich offers her water, then retracts it. She must answer one more question. "Do you confess to consorting with spirits?" She sighs. "No." There's a silence. After this, a long, still silence that settles over the stone room, like dust. Then Ulrich speaks quietly. "We will begin tomorrow." Tomorrow, the shift from talk to torment. It's announced like a change in the weather. He leaves. The door closes. And you remain listening to the drip of a leaking pipe and Lisa's slow breathing. She's not crying, not praying, just staring at her own hands as though trying to memorize them before they're bruised. Outside the chamber, Johann walks past, cloak brushing against the rough stone. He pauses just briefly to glance at the record Ulrich's posted to the door. He nods once, approves. The sun is setting above. Somewhere in town, bread is being baked, bells are ringing for evening prayer, and children are playing with sticks in the mud. But down here beneath the castle, the night arrives early, and it is full of questions that no answer can satisfy. The door opens with a sound like dry bark cracking. It's morning, though. Down here in the examination chamber, there's no real indication of time passing. The torches burn the same way they did last night, giving off that heavy, syrupy smoke that settles in your clothes. Ulrich returns carrying a leather roll of instruments. It isn't grand or theatrical, no swinging pendulums or flaming brands. Just practical, quiet things, iron pins, cords, a wooden crank with leather straps, all laid out with the precision of a surgeon and the detachment of someone who's done this far too many times. Lisa sits where you left her, slumped but upright. Her wrists now bound tighter. A basin of water waits on the floor beside her, untouched. Ulrich begins with a gentle voice. "The mark. We must find it." She doesn't speak. You stand nearby as he works, pressing, probing, pricking with the tip of a small needle. He watches closely, looking for signs, flinching, twitching, bleeding. At one point, he jabs beneath her shoulder blade. She yelps, he frowns. Not the mark. Mainstream historical fact. The search for the devil's mark was a widespread element of European witch trials. It was believed the devil would leave a numb patch on a witch's body impervious to pain and bleeding. So-called witch prickers were hired specialists, and many used retractable needles to fake results when payment depended on discovery. Here's your quirky tidbit. One infamous pricker in Scotland confessed to using a custom needle with a hidden spring so it would retract on contact. He was later tried for fraud, although ironically not for witchcraft. Apparently lying about demons wasn't as serious as consorting with them. Back in the room, Ulrich examines a small mole near Lisa's ankle. He prods it. No pain. He marks it. Possible site, he mutters. Has it always been there? Lisa doesn't answer. He presses harder. She winces. He frowns again. Too much reaction, he says to himself, like a chef testing stew that's slightly too salty to serve. Johann enters quietly. No grand entrance, just a gentle tug of the heavy door and the soft swish of velvet against damp stone. He stands to the side, watching not with pleasure, not with horror. with purpose. "This must be completed today," he says. The people ask for resolution. Ulrich nods. He moves to the table, unrolling a thin rope and a tightening device, an arm binder used to apply steady pressure to the elbows and wrists, drawing them inward. Not enough to break bones, just enough to persuade a confession. You watch as he binds Lisa's arms behind her, cranking slowly. Her breathing hitches. She leans forward but says nothing. He pauses. "Speak the names," he says. "Just one other." Silence. "Do you fly at night?" Still nothing. He adjusts the strap. A soft groan escapes her. You don't know if it's pain or frustration. Maybe both. Historians still argue whether torture yielded truth or simply exhausted obedience. Records show that over 90% of accused witches confessed under torture, but many later retracted those statements if they survived long enough to do so. You pace now near the wall, noticing scratches on the stones, past prisoners, marks of fingernails, or just tricks of the firelight. Johann walks closer to Lisa. He doesn't shout. He kneels. "Child," he says, "you were led astray. We can still save you, but you must be honest." His voice is soft, almost paternal, but you see the danger in that softness, the expectation that she will break simply because he sounds kind while condemning her. Lisa raises her head. "There's nothing to say," she whispers. "I feed goats. I sweep the floor. I sing when no one's listening." "You sing," Johann echoes. Yes, her voice steadier now, not to summon storms, just to feel alive. And that's the problem. A young woman alone, ungoverned, surviving without marriage or oversight, that in itself is a threat in a world built on obedience. Ulrich moves forward, but Johann raises a hand. "No more today." He straightens. "Tomorrow, then." If no confession, the sacred trial proceeds. They leave. The door shuts. Lise breathes raggedly now, her arms still bound, her hair limp. She leans her head against the wall, and for a moment, you swear she hums. Just one note, low, shaky. Outside, the snow is falling again. You follow the flakes up through the cracks in the ceiling and back to the street, where townsfolk murmur behind their shutters, because everyone knows what comes next. You wake, or maybe just blink, in the same narrow corridor outside the examination chamber. The torches are lower now. The air feels heavier, like the walls are exhaling something they've been holding in for centuries. You step quietly past a sleeping guard and up toward the main tribunal room, where today's business begins, not with judgment, but with hearsay. Today is testimonial day. That means townspeople, witnesses, stories told under oath or fear, or just the crushing pressure of communal silence. The doors swing open, and in shuffle the villagers bundled in shawls, stiff from the cold, avoiding each other's eyes. They sit on the low wooden benches arranged near the front of the hall. Johann watches from his elevated seat beneath a painted crucifix flanked by Ulrich and the ever-scribbling clerk. His fingers are laced together. His face is unreadable. One by one the witnesses rise. The first is Frau Gerda, the baker's wife, who swears she saw Lisa's goat bleat in Latin. That's right, Latin. When pressed for details, she amends it. Well, it sounded Latin. The room nods gravely. Mainstream historical fact. At the height of witch trials in the Holy Roman Empire, spoken evidence didn't need to be consistent. Testimonies were rarely challenged in open court, especially if the witness was in good standing. Reputation mattered more than logic. Next comes Klaus, a cobbler who once spotted Lisa talking to herself in the woods. No one else was there, he insists. When asked if he was close enough to hear what she said, he confesses he wasn't. But the trees were very still, he adds, as if that clinches it. Then there's young Marta, no more than 12, who tells the room that Lisa once gave her a charm, a small braid of goat hair and red thread. For luck, Lisa had said. The girl kept it hidden until her older brother found it and said it smelled wrong. Quirky tidbit charms like that, simple weavings of hairstring or dried herbs, were common in medieval rural life. They were often gifts, not spells. But during witch panics, even a string bracelet could be twisted into evidence of demonic influence. Johann listens unmoved. Ulrich glances over at the list of names. He's heard this all before. Then a new witness stands. It's the town priest, Father Byrne. He's thin, gaunt, and his hands tremble slightly as he holds his worn prayer book. She came to Mass, he begins, but she never took the sacrament. Said she wasn't ready. He looks down. I assumed it was grief, but now I wonder. The silence that follows is heavier than accusation, its implication the most dangerous kind of testimony. Historians still argue whether the clergy in these towns genuinely believed in the trials or simply feared losing their authority if they questioned them. Some priests openly resisted the witch hunts. Others, like Barron, floated just enough concern to stay aligned without taking blame. You glance around the room. No one challenges any of it. No one asks, could she have been shy or scared or simply tired? Once suspicion is seated, it grows fast, fed by fear, jealousy, superstition, or even boredom. The clerk continues writing. Pages rustle like dry leaves. Somewhere outside, a dog barks and is quickly silenced. Then something strange happens. A man stands uninvited, middle-aged soot on his sleeves. He's the blacksmith Jakob. I don't believe she's guilty, he says. A few heads turn. She's strange, yes. Talks to animals. But she also patched my son's coat without asking. And once gave my wife rosemary for her headaches. That's not witchcraft. That's kindness. The silence is icy. Johann tilts his head. And what do you believe, Herr Jakob? Jakob swallows hard. I believe we're scared. And sometimes scared people make mistakes. There it is. The only moment of resistance. Johann doesn't scold him, doesn't argue. He simply nods once and motions to the guard. Jakob is quietly escorted out, not arrested, not punished. But he won't be called again. The day ends with a final testimony from an old woman who claims her bread didn't rise the morning after Lisa walked past her house. That's the last straw. Johann announces that enough evidence has been gathered to proceed. Lisi will face the Ordalium Sanctum, the sacred trial, which is, of course, neither sacred nor a trial in any modern sense. It's a ritualized method of extracting a confession. The townspeople file out. No cheering, no outrage, just that same soft murmur of complicity like wind moving through tall grass. You remain behind a moment listening to the empty benches creak in the cold. You can still smell the oil from the lamps. And something else, faintly burnt flour maybe, or singed parchment. It clings to the air the way guilt does. The tribunal chamber is quiet, now emptied of spectators and murmured fears. You follow Johann as he walks alone down a narrow hallway, branching from the main hall, a passage lined with wooden cabinets and heavy locks. The flickering torchlight dances across rows of drawers, each labeled in faded script. This is the archive. Or more accurately, the armory, because this is where truth is manufactured. Johann stops at a cabinet marked Instrumenta Dei. He opens it with a thick iron key and pulls out a slim red-bound volume, his own copy of the Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, the imperial code of law. He flips to a bookmarked page, runs his finger down the margin, and sighs. You sense the weight of ritual here, not faith ritual. This is the Prince Bishop's Toolkit. Mainstream historical fact. Prince bishops like Johann operated with a blend of civil and ecclesiastical authority. The Carolina Code allowed torture under strict conditions, sufficient evidence, multiple witnesses, and a judge's personal approval. But those rules were often bent or blurred when witchcraft was involved. Johann turns to a smaller shelf. He removes a shallow wooden drawer and carries it to the center table. Inside are objects arranged like a holy relic collection, pins, a small balance scale, 2 lead weights, and a polished bronze needle mounted in bone. Then he opens another drawer. Inside lies something far more disturbing, a doll. Not a child's toy, but a crudely carved figure made from ash wood, with coarse hair nailed into its scalp and a mouth painted shut with pitch. One of the effigies collected from a suspect's home during last year's trials. Quirky tidbit. These puppet witches were believed to be magical decoys, small representations used by real witches to cast harm or mislead investigators. Some villagers insisted these dolls could speak, cry, or even move at night. More often, they were bundles of fabric stuffed with herbs or feathers, folk medicine, not malice. Johann examines the doll now with the same careful touch he'd use for a rare book. He doesn't smile, doesn't frown, just studies it, then returns it to the drawer. Next to it rests a thin booklet of sample confessions, real names, real signatures, most of them barely legible. Johann flips through, pausing at one entry. Magdalena T. confessed to flying on a spindle during storms. The date is from 4 winters ago. Her confession is bracketed with a note burned. No known accomplices. Historians still argue whether these confession books were tools of justice or trophies of terror. Some say they were meant to maintain order and accountability. Others suggest they served as grim trophies, proof of righteousness, in a world desperate to prove its own purity. You walk slowly along the wall where mounted plaques display various instruments. A thin chain, a choking collar, iron thumbscrews. Not for display, for reference. There's a manual beside them. Latin script diagrams of body positions and pressure angles. Guidance, it says, for spiritual clarification. Ulrich enters now. He doesn't look at the plaques, just gives Johann a brief nod. The girl is stable, he says. No confession, no collapse. Tomorrow, Johann replies, the water trial. He means the ordeal by water, a sacred test. Not for guilt, of course, just for optics. You know the logic. If she sinks, she's innocent. If she floats, she's guilty. Either way, she suffers. Johann returns the doll to its drawer and closes the cabinet. He doesn't lock it. This isn't a man building chaos. He's building order, his kind of order. An order that fits onto shelves, fits into scrolls, fits into sleepless nights spent scribbling names beside bloodless checkmarks. You lean beside the door, watching him make notes. His handwriting is angular tight. Even the way he writes feels like judgment. He stands and extinguishes the lamp beside him, pausing only to whisper a line of scripture under his breath. Something about wheat and chaff and divine separation. The flame gutters out, and in the dark you hear only the sound of the bronze needle clinking back into place. It's morning again, or at least the sky is trying to be. Pale light leaks through the slits of the castle's stonework, like someone forgot how to paint sunrise properly. The air bites at your skin, and a low wind hums through the courtyard like a warning whispered in Latin. You follow the procession to the riverbank just outside Trier, where the ordeal by water is set to take place. No ceremony, no prayers, just a rope scale and the shallow ice-crusted waters of the Moselle. A small crowd has gathered. Not many. Just a few townsfolk who heard whispers, plus 2 local priests and a baker pretending he just happened to be walking this way with a sack of flour. Ulrich is here. So is Johann. Neither looks cold. Lisa stands in the middle arms loosely bound cloakless. Her feet bare. She doesn't shiver. Mainstream historical fact. The water ordeal or swimming test was one of the more theatrical rituals used in witch trials, based on the idea that pure elements, especially water, would reject the impure. It was believed that a witch would float because water, being holy, would not accept their corrupted body. Sinking, ironically, was a sign of innocence. Survival was rare either way. Lisa is led forward. Ulrich holds the rope with the precision of someone measuring flour, not preparing a human being for trial. She says nothing. She looks not at the water, but at the sky, as if searching for a crack in it, something to slip through. Johann steps forward, holding a parchment. The accused is offered a final chance. Speak truth and be spared the ordeal. You wait. So does everyone else. Lisa blinks slowly. This water knows me, she says softly. Not the confession they wanted. The rope is tied around her waist. A weight affixed to her ankles, not heavy enough to drag, just enough to steady. 2 men on either end of the line. The edge of the river has been broken with oars earlier that morning, but the surface still hisses with thin ice. Ulrich nods. Lisa is lowered in. For a moment, nothing. Then she floats. Her body tilts, gently hair spreading like ink across the surface. She doesn't fight it, doesn't kick, just lets herself drift, her eyes open, unblinking. The crowd murmurs. She floats, someone says. She's light, says another. Or empty, a third whispers. Johann watches without expression. Remove her. The men haul her back. Her skin is bluish now, goose flesh rising like braille across her arms. She coughs once, not violently, just enough to remind them she's still here. And now comes the inevitable line. She has denied confession. She has failed the test. She is judged guilty under divine witness. That's how it works. Float and be guilty. Sink and be absolved posthumously, of course. Medieval logic, the kind that fits neatly into death, but never into mercy. Quirky tidbit. Some water ordeals were performed in church wells, not rivers. The idea being that sanctified water gave clearer answers. Of course, no one questioned the idea that half the wells had dead frogs or algae in them. Holiness apparently isn't affected by plumbing. Back on shore, Lisa is wrapped in a coarse linen sheet and led back toward the tribunal hall. No applause, no crying, just footsteps squishing through muddy earth and the wheeze of an ox cart passing on the far road. Johann walks behind her, hands clasped. He does not gloat. This isn't triumph, it's administration. Historians still argue whether the water trial was genuinely believed to be effective, or if it was merely symbolic, a ritual to convince the public that justice had been served. A show, in other words, a dangerous freezing show. Inside the castle once more, Lisi is placed back into confinement. No further questioning. Her fate is sealed now. Only paperwork remains. You remain in the corridor as Ulrich drafts the final recommendation for execution. The phrasing is stiff, condemned not by evidence alone, but by the judgment of the sacred element. As if it wasn't men who tied the rope, as if the water whispered guilt. Evening descends. In the bakery near the square, a woman is slicing loaves while her daughter stares out the window, as if watching for something she can't quite name. In a town like this, it doesn't take long for people to start forgetting, to tell themselves that the water really did reveal something, that justice had a face, that none of it was their fault. You return to the river one last time. The rope still lies there, coiled like a forgotten question. The sun rises late over Trier the next day, hiding behind a thick curtain of low-gray clouds that don't seem especially concerned with illuminating anything. The town feels like it's holding its breath. You walk the cobbled streets and find shutters latched tighter than usual. Dogs aren't barking. Children aren't laughing, because today is burning day. The square is already being prepared. You see it as you round the corner, the stake driven deep into the earth, the wood piled with unnerving neatness. Freshly cut logs stacked like a chore, finished by someone proud of their efficiency. A rope coils at the top, swaying slightly in the wind, like it's trying to decide whether it's still just rope or something more. You step closer to the crowd, which is gathering in clusters, silent, bundled, watching, but pretending not to. You see bread sellers and butchers and people you remember from the testimony day, all standing in the same shared pose, arms crossed, eyes averted, not indifferent, not horrified, just prepared. And here she comes. Lisa's led into the square by 4 guards. She walks. She's not dragged. Her feet are bare again, and there's a smudge of ash on her cheek. Someone has bound her hair back neatly. Perhaps in some twisted gesture, they thought this was mercy. Mainstream historical fact. Public executions during witch trials were treated like community rituals. Attendance was high, especially when the accused was from a nearby village. Sometimes clergy would give a sermon beforehand. Other times, a simple prayer was muttered before the flames were lit. Today, there is no sermon, just Father Byrne standing off to the side, his eyes down, fingers twitching through rosary beads faster than seems possible for prayer. The townspeople say nothing, but they watch. Johann arrives on horseback. His robe is deep crimson today, symbolic, no doubt, of righteous blood. He sits high, flanked by 2 armed riders. He nods once toward Ulrich. The official declaration is read. Lisa of the outer hamlet for consorting with spirits, for spoiling the weather, for corrupting animals and speech and sacred soil. The list goes on, but the words slide past you now. You're watching Lisa's eyes. They're not afraid. Not exactly. There's defiance there, buried beneath exhaustion. A spark. And then it happens. From the crowd, a child breaks free. A small boy, barely 10, running forward, shouting something. You can't hear it at first. The guards move, stepping toward him, but Johann holds up a hand. Let him speak? My mother said Lisa saved her. The boy cries. When she was sick, with herbs, she made her better. The crowd tenses. Someone grabs the child, pulling him back. The guards shift, unsure. And for a second, just a second, you think maybe, just maybe this will pause. That the rope won't be tied. That someone will say, enough. But no one does. Johann speaks evenly. Even the devil works through kindness when it suits him. Quirky tidbit. This exact reasoning shows up in numerous trial records from the period. If the accused was kind, they were manipulating. If they were cruel, they were dangerous. If they were silent, they were hiding something. It was an accusation that adapted like fire to wind. Lise is tied to the stake. The ropes are firm, but not cruel. That's the terrifying part. They're meticulous. As if the men doing this are convinced they're enacting sacred law, not murder. Ulrich lights the torch himself. The first flame touches the wood with a whisper. Lise does not scream. Not at first. Her body twists, her shoulders jerk, but she holds on longer than you thought possible. She looks out, not at Johann, not at the priest, but at the boy in the crowd. You swear she mouths, "It's not your fault." The wind shifts, the smoke climbs. The crowd begins to move. Not quickly, just drifting away like the event has ended and there's baking to get on with. Lives to return to. Johann remains a moment longer staring into the fire, not gloating, not grieving, just watching Historians still argue whether men like Johann saw these executions as moral acts or political maneuvers. Did they believe in witches, or did they simply believe in order? The line between faith and fear, between belief and bureaucracy, was often burned away with the bodies. Lisa's ashes rise into the sky. You stay behind long after the square is cleared. The smoke lingers. So does the smell wood oil and something else that isn't just fire, something heavier. You think of Jacob the blacksmith. You wonder what he's thinking now behind his shuttered window. And you think of the boy, and the goats, and the red cloak folded somewhere in a storage room already forgotten. The next morning arrives like an apology, soft light, the smell of dew instead of ash birds daring to chirp again. You wander through the quieter parts of Trier, away from the tribunal square, past crooked chimneys, and the humbler homes of weavers, tanners, and candle makers. The town seems eager to pretend yesterday didn't happen, but you're not the only one who remembers. Inside a tidy home near the west gate, a widow named Alma finishes tying a ribbon around a loaf of barley bread. It's for her niece's name day, but her hands shake. Not from age, but from the memory of what she saw. She didn't speak yesterday. She didn't object, but she didn't look away either. And that in this town is something. She sets the loaf down and moves to her cupboard. Hidden behind a jar of salt is a folded scrap of parchment. A name. Not Lias's, but someone else's. Someone Alma suspects. Or maybe envies. Or maybe she's just afraid not to write anything at all. You begin to realize something chilling. The trial hasn't ended. It's just moved to someone else. Mainstream historical fact. In regions like Trier during Johann's reign, witch trials often triggered chain reactions. Once one woman was executed, neighbors, relatives, and even children of the accused became targets. In some towns, the number of trials doubled within months of a high-profile execution. Later that day, Johann meets with Ulrich in his study. The fire is low. A fresh scroll sits on the table, its ink still drying. It's a list. Names submitted by townspeople. Some are familiar, others are new. 3 widows, Ulrich says. 2 midwives. And the schoolteacher. Johann nods. The schoolteacher. She's written pamphlets, Ulrich replies. Some say they challenge church teachings. That's enough, Johann mutters. There's no malice in his tone, just practicality, like he's reviewing crop reports. Quirky tidbit. In 16th century Germany, printing or even copying unauthorized religious texts could be seen as heretical, especially if the author was female. A woman writing about childbirth or folk medicine might be labeled subversive, even if her work had nothing to do with the devil. You trail them through the rest of the afternoon as they quietly prepare the next stage. This time, no grand arrests, just letters, invitations to appear, a few whispers to local priests. It's the quiet phase of the machine, the part where no smoke rises but the fires are already being stoked. That evening, in the inn near the cathedral, 2 women share a meal, flatbread, boiled carrots, and a small wedge of hard cheese. They speak in low voices. One of them, Greta, used to work with Lisa, helped her with goats during a winter storm. The other, Marta, still keeps the charm Lisa gave her, the braided thread. She hasn't shown anyone. She thinks it might now be dangerous to even touch it. Do you think she really? Marta whispers. No, Greta says. Then more quietly. But it doesn't matter, does it? You pass through the inn as the fire crackles and the candlelight trembles. Outside, a patrol walks past, slowly, armor, clinking boots, scraping. They don't stop. They don't need to. Their presence is enough. Historians still argue whether the post-execution phase of these trials was fueled more by public fear or administrative inertia. Some say towns fell into a kind of grief-stricken panic, pointing fingers to feel safe. Others claim the real driver was men like Johann, methodical, relentless, determined to cleanse not just sin, but uncertainty itself. Back in the tribunal hall, the confession books are being updated. A scribe, young Board, flips back through the older entries. He reads Lisa's page, underlines her name once, and turns the page. He doesn't pause, because now there are more names to write. You leave the castle and walk toward the riverbank. The water is calm today. Nothing floats. Nothing sinks. You spot the rope still coiled by the bank now, half frozen to the ground. You stare at it for a long time, and realize it isn't over. Dawn doesn't arrive so much as seep into the world. Pale light creeps into Trier with a certain resignation, as if it already knows what's about to happen. You find yourself in the rectory today, the quiet quarters attached to the town chapel, and sitting inside, bleary-eyed and disheveled, is Father Byrne. He hasn't slept. He's rereading Lisa's record, her baptism certificate, her attendance ledger, the small notes he once scribbled about her family. Quiet child, kept her shoes off in church. Now that scribble feels damning. Or maybe it always did. Father Byrne stares out of the window, hands clutched around a cup of tea that's long since gone cold. A single candle flickers beside him. It's still early, but he knows what the day will bring, because one of the names on Johan's new list is familiar. Very familiar. Her name is Rosa. She's 8. Mainstream historical fact. During the height of the witch hunts in Central Europe, even children were accused. Some were thought to be born of witches and thus infected by association. Others were suspected of dreaming wrong, described as having visions or saying unsettling things. Accusations could come from neighbors' family or even teachers. Father Byrne closes the folder with shaking hands. Rosa is the daughter of the town's former healer, a woman named Alka, who died 2 winters ago of pneumonia. Alka was never accused of witchcraft. Too useful, too quiet. But Rosa has started talking to herself and drawing symbols in the dirt. At least that's what her schoolteacher says. You find Rosa sitting on the steps outside the chapel, carving a spiral into the frost with a stick. Not a pentagram, not a summoning circle, just a spiral, the kind children draw when they're bored. She looks up. Is Lisa coming back? She asks softly. You don't answer. Father Byrne emerges and gently ushers her inside. He speaks kindly, even lovingly, but there's a weight in his voice, a fear that clings to every syllable. You can feel the struggle inside him. To protect, to obey, to survive. Later that morning, Johann meets with his council. Rosa's name is read aloud. Johann frowns slightly. Too young, he says. Ulrich shrugs, but already marked. The logic is chilling. Better to intervene early, they say, before she becomes dangerous, before she follows her mother's footsteps, before she learns the wrong words. Johann hesitates only for a moment. Begin with the teacher. See if the child imitates her. A pause. No public action until we're certain. Quirky tidbit. Some 16th century witchcraft handbooks recommended observing suspected children for 7 nights straight to see if they twitched in sleep. Any sign of nightmares or sleepwalking was considered proof of diabolical influence. Dreams, in other words, could get you killed. Outside, the streets are quiet again. People nod to each other, eyes down, doors closed fast. It's a season of suspicion, a time when silence is both a shield and an admission. You trail Ulrich and the guards as they pay a visit to the schoolhouse. The teacher, Frau Betz, is surprised but composed. She's in her 40s, unmarried and well-read. Not a healer, not a midwife, just a woman who teaches letters and keeps a neat ledger. Too neat, some say. She offers tea. No one accepts. They ask her about Rosa's drawings. It's a spiral, she replies. Not a sigil, not a glyph, just a spiral children draw. But she draws it every day, Ulrich says. And you wear red on Thursdays, she replies. Patterns aren't always sinister. It's a brave answer, but not a smart one. She's asked to accompany them for further questioning, just to clarify things. She nods calmly, gathers her shawl, and says nothing more. Historians still argue whether women like Frau Betz were accused for what they did or what they represented. An unmarried woman with influence, a sharp tongue, and no man to defend her could be terrifying in a world ruled by men who feared ambiguity. As they leave the schoolhouse, Rosa watches through a crack in the shutters. You wonder what she's learning in this moment. Not about numbers or prayers, but about fear, about how adults disappear when they speak too clearly. That night, the tribunal holds a quiet hearing. No crowds, no torches, just a few candles and several quills scratching along parchment. Frau Betz refuses to confess. She quotes Cicero. She questions grammar. She corrects the clerk's Latin. They don't smile. The next morning, she's listed as under investigation. Her home is searched. Books are taken. A cat is found and removed. The town priest says a blessing over the school. And Rosa's moved to a neighbor's house. Not because she's safe, but because she's next. By now, you know the rhythm. A name is whispered. A suspicion is written down. A visit is made. And slowly, inevitably, the town's orbit tightens around the accused. This week, it's Frau Betz. Next week, well, the parchment isn't blank. You walk the streets of Trier and feel how much quieter everything is. Not because it's peaceful, because it's watchful. People speak less. Doors creak less. Even the wind seems afraid to make noise. You pass the marketplace and hear someone say, "She had too many books." That's all. That's enough. Frau Betz has been transferred from the tribunal chamber to the cellar beneath the old bishop's storehouse, just to wait, they said. But the guards brought ropes. You find Johann there at his desk in the storehouse office, the fire behind him, casting strange shadows across the scrolls. He's reviewing a list again. Always a list. Names, notes, ticks, circles. He seems tired, not shaken, not guilty, but thinner somehow, as if orchestrating the purification of an entire region eats at a man in places he can't name. Ulrich enters with a short report. No confession, but she quotes scripture. Clean Latin, knows the Psalms, doesn't flinch. Johann nods. That's often the cleverest kind. Mainstream historical fact. Many accused witches were highly literate women. Some had read scripture and knew it well enough to defend themselves, which ironically made them more suspicious. The thinking was, if she knows holy things, why hasn't she become holy herself? A new witness arrives, a man named Lorenz, who once worked as a tax clerk. He says he saw Frau Betz writing something with unusual symbols. When asked to describe them, he says, "Not letters, like ants crawling in a circle. They were probably shorthand. Doesn't matter." Lorenz is thanked and dismissed. Quirky tidbit. In 1570s Germany, the use of non-standard handwriting like merchant shorthand or early cipher was seen by some as secretive and thus potentially diabolical. One woman was accused after someone mistook her German cursive for enchantments. That night, you visit Frau Betz in her cell. She's seated on a stool, back straight, eyes alert. She doesn't look scared. She looks bored. "They think I turned Rosa into a bird," she says softly. You blink. She climbs trees, Betz explains. "Naturally, I must have taught her to fly." She smiles faintly. It doesn't last. She looks up at the dripping ceiling. "You know, it's funny, I don't even believe in witches. Never did. Still don't." You don't say anything. "But I do believe in fire," she adds. And fear. And neighbors with grudges. The trial is set for the next day. No water this time, just words. In the tribunal hall, the crowd is thinner than usual. Fewer people want to attend a hearing where the accused might be right. Johann begins with formality. Scripture is quoted. A record of Betz's possessions is read: 2 candles, 11 books, dried sage, a jar of wax, and somehow, most damning, a sketch of a spiral. Not Lisa's, Rosa's. The girl copied it from her, the scribe says. This symbol has appeared before. No one knows what it means. Which is the point? Frau Betz is asked to speak. She steps forward untied. No ropes, just silence. "I taught children to write," she says. To think. To ask questions. She looks at Johann. That's the real danger, isn't it? He says nothing. Historians still argue whether women like Betz were punished for actual threat or symbolic disruption. Were they dangerous or just inconvenient reminders that order is fragile? The judgment is read. Guilty. Sentence confinement followed by a public reckoning. They've stopped saying execution out loud. You walk past the townsfolk afterward, and no one speaks her name. Not because they're scared, because by now it's routine. That night, Rosa draws another spiral in the dirt outside the neighbor's house. This time, she stamps it out with her foot, then goes inside. Midwinter descends like a sigh over Trier. Snow collects in the corners of the eaves, but no one bothers to clear it anymore. Chimneys puff lazily, but the warmth inside homes feels conditional, only extended to those whose names haven't yet landed on Johann's growing lists. You drift through the castle grounds and find the air different somehow. Not louder, not colder, just heavier. Like the ground itself is listening now, watching, waiting. Back in Johann's study, another strategy session is underway. The table is cluttered with maps, scrolls, and a fresh stack of reports. Ulrich reads them aloud slowly, like scripture. Another town to the south. Rumors of a woman who blesses her bread with herbs. A boy said to heal animals with touch. A midwife who delivers babies with chants in an unknown tongue, which upon investigation turns out to be Welsh. You begin to see the pattern. It's not about witches anymore. Maybe it never was. It's about deviation. Deviation from expectation, from control, from the neat, quiet rules of this trembling, terrified society. Johann stands at the window. He's not wearing his velvet cloak today, just a wool coat and boots lined with rabbit fur. He looks tired, gaunt. His hands tremble slightly as he presses them to the cold glass. "Send word," he says at last. "We must visit them quietly." Ulrich nods. Mainstream historical fact. Witch hunting under Johann's rule expanded beyond Trier, rippling into outlying villages and counties under his jurisdiction. Entire communities were decimated. In some areas, over half the female population was accused. Often the accused were healers, widows, midwives, anyone with knowledge or independence. That afternoon, you follow Johann and his retinue to a nearby village called Zell. It's a humble place, one inn, one church, and one stone well surrounded by snow. The people there greet Johann not with fanfare, but with visible tension. Bows too deep, smiles too tight. You see them glance at the woman sweeping outside her cottage. That's Hilda the midwife. She doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. She already knows they're here for her. Johann asks to speak with her. She nods, invites him inside. Her home is warm, filled with the scent of dried apples and wood smoke. A bundle of herbs hangs near the hearth, mugwort, yarrow, lavender, the tools of her trade. And now, damning symbols. Quirky tidbit midwives in the 16th century often relied on herbal lore passed down through generations. Lavender to calm labor pains, yarrow to staunch bleeding. These remedies were seen as suspicious because they worked especially in communities where male physicians were scarce or absent. Johann sits across from her at the table. No accusation yet, just polite inquiry. Hilda offers tea. "Do you speak to spirits, Mistress Hilda?" he asks calmly. "No," she replies. "I speak to women, to mothers, to the dying." He nods. "And the herbs. For easing pain, that's all. And the chants." She smiles. To soothe panic, not to summon anything. But he's already writing. Quietly, the ink hisses as it soaks into the parchment. Ulrich examines the herbs. He finds a carved stone round smooth with a spiral etched into one side. "You've seen this before," he says, showing it to Johann. "Not hers," Hilda interrupts. "That was my mother's. For protection." Johann doesn't look up. Protection from what? She's silent. Historians still argue whether the spiral motif found in so many witch trials was ever more than coincidence. Was it a folk symbol, a pagan remnant, or simply a shape that people draw when they don't know what else to create? Hilda is not arrested that day. She's invited to Trier for further conversation. They leave her house as the sun sets, casting long shadows through the village. No one speaks as they pass, but doors close softly behind them. In the tribunal chamber that night, Johann writes her name beneath Betz's. 2 spirals, one faint, one bold. And at the bottom of the parchment, a new column begins. Children observed near suspects. The title is neat. The implications are not. You return to the village one last time before night falls and find the children drawing in the snow. Spirals again. Only this time, they erase them before anyone can see. The road back to Trier crunches beneath wagon wheels and hoofbeats, but you hear none of it. You're watching Hilda. She rides in the covered cart wrapped in a wool shawl, hands resting on her lap. She doesn't cry, doesn't pray, just stares out at the snow-heavy sky like someone reading a book no one else can see. Ulrich rides behind her. The guards say nothing. When they arrive, she's not thrown into a dungeon. Not yet. Instead, she's housed in the same tower cell where Betz was kept high up with just enough of a view to see the rooftops but not the sky. A reminder that freedom is now a matter of elevation. Back in the tribunal office, Johann sits alone. His fingers press into his temples, eyes closed. A tray beside him holds uneaten bread and a cup of mulled wine gone cold. You sense it now more than ever. He's not winning anything. He's managing collapse. He opens a letter. It's from a neighboring bishopric, a warning veiled as advice. Your fires draw scrutiny, it says. The court in Mainz asks questions. He folds the parchment carefully. Does not respond. Mainstream historical fact. By the early 1580s, word of the mass executions in Trier reached other parts of the Holy Roman Empire. While some applauded Johann's fervor, others began to worry he had lost control. Several noble courts issued quiet inquiries fearing unrest and reputational ruin. That afternoon, Ulrich meets with the interrogators. He gives clear instructions. No marks, no breaking, just observation. But observation can be crueler than torture. Over the next 2 days, Hilda is kept awake with soft music. Bread is withheld. Water is given inconsistently. Her herbs are shown to her, then burned before her eyes. Each session ends the same way. We are here to help you find peace. Tell us the names. She does not speak them. Instead, she asks for ink. To record a birth chant, she says, so you'll know it's not evil. They give her coal. She writes it anyway on the wall, line by line in neat curling script. She uses symbols too. Not spirals this time, but circles within circles. One of the guards says it looks like a sun. Another thinks it's a breast. Either way, they panic. The wall is scrubbed. The chant is gone. Quirky tidbit. In some regions of 16th century Germany, a woman accused of witchcraft could be further incriminated by the shape of her handwriting. Rounded letters suggested softness and thus deception. Sharp angles meant defiance. Either could be twisted into guilt. Johann hears of the chant, but he's already reviewing new letters this time from nobles. One Baron Osterhagen writes with thinly veiled disdain, "Your campaign draws attention. Markets suffer. Pilgrims avoid Trier. It may be time to let the wind settle." But wind, as Johann knows, is unpredictable, and Hilda has not confessed. That night, a storm rolls in real not imagined. Rain lashes against the towers, freezing on impact. Guards shuffle in place, pulling cloaks tighter. The tribunal hall feels colder than it should. Inside her cell, Hilda lights a stolen scrap of candle and draws the circle again, this time on the floor using ash. She hums softly. Not a spell, a lullaby for no one. But Rosa hears it. She's been moved again, this time into the church orphanage. She lies awake on her cot, the spiral charm still hidden beneath her pillow, untouched but warm. And in her mind, she hears the song. Historians still argue whether women like Hilda preserved folk traditions out of resistance or simply memory. Some say these chants were pre-Christian echoes. Others argue they were nothing more than comfort meaningful only to those who needed them most. But either way, the record shows this on the third morning of her confinement, Hilda was found silent. Not dead, but changed. She had plaited her hair with threads from her blanket. She had drawn a new spiral on her cell door, this one made from chewed bread, carefully placed as though meant to be seen. Ulrich ordered it washed. Johann said nothing, and that afternoon a new witness came forward. A child. Not Rosa, but one of the others. They had seen Hilda in a dream. She flew, they said, and she told me my name backwards. That was enough. The dream testimony spreads like frost across a window pane, quick, silent, and impossible to ignore. A child's vision, vague and half-remembered, is now the central pillar in a fresh case against Hilda. That she flew, that she spoke backwards, that she glowed. None of it makes sense. But that's the point, isn't it? Johann sits at his desk again, writing. But this time his quill stalls. He's been trying to draft a message to the bishop in Mainz for hours. The page remains mostly blank. Only the salutation is written to His Grace in Mainz, and nothing else. Because what can he say? That he believes in flying women, that children's dreams hold legal weight, that all this is purification and not performance. He stands abruptly and paces. Even Ulrich gives him space today. Mainstream historical fact. The use of dream witnesses wasn't uncommon in later phases of European witch panics. Children especially were treated as innocent vessels of divine truth. If a child claimed to dream of an accused person flying or chanting, it was often considered irrefutable evidence. The accused couldn't deny it, it had happened in another realm. That morning, Hilda is brought again to the tribunal hall. She's barefoot, pale, not from illness, but from confinement. Her eyes are sharp though, and her voice is calm. "I dreamed too," she says. "I dreamed of a world where healing women weren't burned, where you could brew tea for cramps and not be called a whore of hell." Ulrich motions to silence her, but Johann holds up a hand. "Do you deny speaking to the child in her sleep?" "I deny speaking at all," Hilda replies, "but if she heard my voice, then maybe her soul needed singing." That answer is far too poetic for safety. Quirky tidbit. One 16th century account from Würzburg details a woman executed for singing in another's dream. Her defense was that she had merely hummed aloud while asleep in a nearby house. Still, it was enough. Dream space became evidence space. Later that day, a second child comes forward, then a third. Each with their own half-baked dream, Hilda appeared in their bedrooms. Hilda danced on their roofs. Hilda whispered through cracks in the walls. It's nonsense, but dangerous nonsense. The tribunal scribes begin assembling the language of final judgment. Johann signs his name at the bottom, but his handwriting is looser now. Not out of guilt, just fatigue. He knows the rhythm now too. That evening, the city square is prepared again. No bonfire this time, just the hanging tree, a concession to the letter from Mainz, which cautioned against further smoke rising from Trier. Johann chooses discretion over drama. Historians still argue whether this moment of the switch from fire to rope signaled Johann's slow retreat or merely an aesthetic change. Was he curbing the spectacle or just changing its scent? Hilda is led to the square under cover of mist. The crowd is smaller. There's no bell, only footsteps and frost. Ulrich reads the charge, consorting with infernal forces through dreams, influencing the minds of innocents, corrupting the threshold between sleep and waking. You wonder if anyone hears how absurd it sounds. She speaks one last time. To those children, she says, "I gave nothing but my silence. If they dreamed of me, it's because they heard no one else singing." Then the trapdoor falls. It's not immediate, but it is final. The crowd disperses like breath in cold air. Johann returns to the castle without a word. That night, something strange happens. Rosa, tucked into her cot at the orphanage, begins humming softly. Not a tune she's heard before, one of her own, a gentle circular rhythm. Another girl across the room hears it, then another, and slowly they hum it together. They don't know it's Hilda's chant. They just know it makes them feel safe, or seen, or maybe just warm. Quirky detail. Long after the trials ended, some rural German lullabies preserved strange spiral-like cadences and verses with uncertain origins. Some musicologists argue they were echoes of women like Hilda songs passed from memory to mouth long after the fires stopped. In the cell that once held Hilda, the spiral she drew erased with cold water has left a faint imprint, not visible, just something felt. A pattern in the stone, a place where light bends strangely when the candle flickers. And in Johann's chamber, the parchment with Rosa's name remains untouched. For now, the cold this morning is sharp enough to bite through boots. It slices down alleys, sneaks under doorframes, and turns breath into ghosts. You walk through Trier and notice something new. Silence has shifted into suspicion again. Not of witches, of Johann. People aren't speaking openly, not yet. But they linger longer in doorways. They exchange looks. They begin using his title with less reverence and more precision. The Prince Bishop, they say, like it's a diagnosis. Back in the tribunal, Johann reads a letter from Mainz again, this one less polite. It accuses him not outright, but between the lines of excessive measures and divinely misaligned priorities. There's a phrase that stands out. If the fire purifies too much, one wonders whether anything remains to rule. He sets the letter down. He does not burn it. That would be too obvious. Ulrich enters stiffly. He knows the temperature outside has nothing on the one in this room. More children spoke last night, he says. One claimed Rosa vanished and reappeared through the floorboards. Was she seen leaving her bed, Johann asks. No, but the girl's eyes were open when she said it. That's apparently enough now. Mainstream historical fact. Toward the end of Trier's witch panic, a notable number of accusations came from children. Some historians suggest the children traumatized, confused, or coached became part of the machinery themselves, generating new accusations that spiraled into surreal territory. One boy accused his father of turning into a crow and flying into the chimney. Johann says nothing. Instead, he rises, moves to the hearth, and stares at the barely glowing embers. She's just a girl, he mutters. What can she possibly know? But Ulrich doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. That evening, a new name appears on the list. Rosa. You feel it like a slap. Not because it's surprising, but because it's inevitable. Still, something has changed. That night, Rosa disappears. Not arrested, not escorted, gone. The sisters at the orphanage swear she was in bed during prayers. One child says she got up for water. Another says she climbed into the rafters and vanished. Most say nothing at all. Johann is furious, or maybe scared. Ulrich dispatches search parties. No dogs, too many have been acting strangely lately. One bit a scribe. Another refused to eat for days. Superstition, Johann insists. But his eyes don't quite agree. The town is canvassed. Barns are searched. Wells checked. Gates watched. No Hause. Quirky tidbit. In a handful of trial records from 16th century Germany, there are cases of accused children simply vanishing before sentencing. Some likely fled with help. Others vanished in the records, their names crossed out without explanation. Folklore, of course, spun this into stories of magical escape or divine intervention. In the tribunal chamber, Johann stares at her name. He does not strike it. He does not add escaped. He simply circles it. A spiral. The search intensifies, but quietly, no public announcements, just locked doors, quiet knocks, whispers behind gloves. And then, one morning, something stranger still. A basket appears at the cathedral steps. No child inside, no letter, just a loaf of bread, a braid of red thread, and a carved pebble with a spiral. No one claims it. Ulrich sends it to Johann, who studies it in silence. It's a message, Ulrich says. No, Johann replies. It's a memory. He leaves the room, parchment still in hand. Historians still argue about Rosa. Some claim she drowned in the river and her body was never found. Others believe she was smuggled out by a former student of Frau Betz. But one monk's diary discovered centuries later contained a curious line. One child escaped the fire, and now the people begin to see the smoke for what it is. That week, something begins to crack in Trier. A shopkeeper refuses to testify. A blacksmith speaks kindly of Hilda. A mother lights a candle for Betz in secret. It's not revolution, but it's friction. The river has thawed slightly, just enough to ripple again, enough to remind you it's always been moving even when frozen. You walk its banks and hear no birds, but you do hear whispers, real ones, coming from townsfolk in twos and threes. Whispers about Rosa, whispers about the bread, the red thread, the spiral stone left at the cathedral. No one claims to believe in magic anymore, but something about that basket unsettled them more than fire ever did. Back in the tribunal tower, Johann stands by the window again. He hasn't slept. His study smells of old candle wax and damp parchment. A dozen letters lie unopened on his desk, most from nobles, some from Rome, all asking questions. He doesn't answer them. Instead, he pulls open a drawer and lays out the carved stones, the confession books, the cloth dolls, the lists, so many lists. It's all laid out like an autopsy, but no one died here. Not really, just clarity. Ulrich enters with a report. No sign of Rosa, he says flatly. But the townspeople, some are shifting, refusing to testify, refusing to speak. Even the priest, Father Byrne, he won't open his door. Johann stares at the river. Then we are losing the script. Ulrich frowns. There was never a script, just fear. And for once, Johann doesn't argue. Mainstream historical fact. Toward the end of the Trier witch trials, a strange quiet did settle over parts of the region. Fewer accusations, more silence. Some historians read it as exhaustion. Others call it resistance disguised as weariness. But in the records, the change is clear. Something softened. That afternoon, a man named Jacob, yes, the same Jacob who once spoke up for Lisa, stands in the square and says a name aloud, Hilda. He says it not with fear, but reverence. Says she helped his wife birth a child during a thunderstorm without a single prayer, and maybe that was a miracle too. He's arrested immediately, but he smiles as they take him away. It spreads. That night, candles appear on windowsills, small ones, tallow, nothing fancy, just one per home. Some say it's for Rosa. Others say it's for the ones who didn't scream when they should have. Johann walks the streets in his cloak, alone. He doesn't order the candles removed, doesn't say a word. He enters the chapel, finds Father Byrne on his knees, praying not with fire, but with desperation. Your Grace, Byrne says without rising, when do we stop pretending we're saving anyone? Johann says nothing, just walks to the altar, looks at the crucifix and wonders, did he ever intend this? Quirky tidbit. In at least one account from 1589, a town near Trier held a candle procession not for saints, but for those silenced by error. No names were spoken, but local historians later suggested it was a veiled ritual for the executed. Back at the castle, Ulrich receives another report, no new accusations. Not one, for the first time in weeks. You think they're hiding something, he asks Johann. No, Johann says, I think they're remembering. He closes the confession book, locks the drawer, puts the key on the desk, and doesn't pick it up again. Historians still argue about this period, about whether Johann ended the trials voluntarily or was forced to by pressure from nobles Rome or his own conscience. No official decree survives, just a gap, a pause, a space where the spiral stopped. But in town, a mother weaves a braid of red thread into her daughter's hair and tells her this keeps the wind away. And no one says it's witchcraft. Not anymore. You wake to bells, not warning bells, not funeral bells, just the soft, slow chimes that mark the passing of a normal hour. It's the first time in weeks they haven't sounded like a threat. The air in Trier feels different, not clean, not healed, but thinner somehow, like a fever has broken. The tribunal chamber is silent, the fire unlit, no new witnesses wait at the door. The scribe's quill lies idle, soaking a blot of ink that no one wipes up. And Johann has not emerged from his chamber. Ulrich finds him still seated by the hearth, boots half-laced cloak fallen over one shoulder like he forgot to finish dressing. He stares into the cold grate. There's no paperwork in his lap, no scrolls, just a small carved spiral, one of Hilda's stones. She was just a midwife, Johann mutters. She saved lives. Ulrich doesn't reply. Johann sets the stone down on the armrest. And Lisa, she sang. Betts taught children. He breathes in shallow. We killed music, literacy, healing. Mainstream historical fact. The aftermath of the Trier witch trials left many regions depopulated, economically strained, and spiritually fractured. Parish records show sharp drops in birth rates and baptisms. Teachers and midwives vanished. In some towns, no woman volunteered to become a healer for a full generation. That day, for the first time in months, the tribunal chamber is open not for a hearing, but for cleaning. Chairs are stacked, ashes swept, no ropes, no chains, no stacked logs, just dust. And, something curious, as the clerks tidy, they find scraps. A child's drawing, the bottom half of a torn confession, one half-burned doll with no eyes. These are gathered into a small crate marked unfiled and set aside, forgotten again. You follow Johann through the castle. He does not speak to anyone. He moves like someone walking through a dream he cannot wake from. In the chapel, he kneels, not in the front row, at the very back. He does not pray aloud. Outside, the townspeople gather, not for protest, not for trial, but for market day. For the first time in months, the square is open for stalls. Bread wool, small carvings, even laughter, tentative yes, but real. And at the far end of the square, someone has tied a red ribbon to the post where Lizzie once stood. No sign, no name, just the ribbon fluttering. Quirky tidbit red ribbons became quiet memorials in some parts of post-trial Germany. In village lore, they were said to hold the breath of those who were lost unjustly. Tying one in public was a small, dangerous act of remembrance. Rosa is never found, but stories emerge. A girl spotted in a southern town living with a shepherd's family. A new voice added to traveling songs. A child who speaks in spirals, not sentences. Historians still debate her fate. Some say she drowned. Some say she ran. Others believe she was hidden by surviving networks of healers and midwives, an underground of women who never needed to name themselves to keep each other safe. Back in the tribunal office, Johann seals a final ledger, not with wax, with twine. He places it on a shelf. Not the shelf of current business, but the archive. I'll answer no more questions, he says to Ulrich. If Rome writes again, tell them the fire has cooled. Ulrich studies him, then nods. That night, another basket appears on the chapel steps. No stone this time, no bread, just a spiral drawn in soot across the lid. And inside lavender, mugwort, goat hair braided with thread. Nothing illegal, just memory. There's something odd about the quiet in Trier now. It isn't the silence of terror, it's the silence that comes after a funeral where grief still hangs in the air, but people have begun to speak again. Softly, carefully, but without fear of being overheard. The markets reopen fully, the schools resume, and the children, they begin to play again. Not just inside, but outside in the courtyards near the cathedral steps, even on the square, that not long ago was a stage for fire and rope. And Rosa's spiral, it begins to show up in chalk, drawn into dirt, traced with sticks. Not large, not defiant, but constant, persistent, like a symbol that doesn't need anyone's permission to mean something. Inside the castle, Johann doesn't preside anymore. He still lives there, still walks the halls, still reads his Latin devotions in the morning, but he does not call sessions. He does not open the tribunal doors. He speaks little to Ulrich now, and even less to the scribes. He's not retired, he's just retreated. Mainstream historical fact. Though Johann von der Leyen continued to serve as Prince Bishop, the fervor of his witch-hunting campaign gradually died out. Whether due to external pressure, internal doubts, or simple political fatigue, the records show a sudden tapering of trials followed by silence. One morning, a courier from Mainz arrives with a sealed message. Johann opens it slowly, reads it once, then again, then sets it on the coals of the hearth where it curls into ash without ceremony. Ulrich watches from across the room. "You're not going to reply?" he asks. "There's nothing to say," Johann replies, "but they want to know what comes next." Johann stares into the fire, then let them come see for themselves. Later that day, the wooden cabinet Instrumenta Dei is opened for the last time, not to retrieve anything, but to remove it all. The dolls, the needles, the scrolls of charges, even the puppet with the painted mouth, all are placed into a burlap sack and carried by Ulrich to the riverbank. He says no words, just tips the sack into the water. The current takes it quickly. No ripple, no sound. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, former inquisitors destroyed their own records when public sentiment turned, but others preserved them either out of guilt, pride, or belief that their actions would be vindicated in the future. Trier's own trial books are incomplete, many pages missing or torn. In the chapel, Father Byrne gives a sermon about healing. He mentions no names, but his voice breaks twice. People stay after, they don't kneel, they sit together, light candles, share bread. And in one corner of the nave, a small spiral has been stitched into the altar cloth, white on white, barely visible. But it's there. Children are baptized again. Midwives begin offering herbs again. Women sing again quietly, but without apology. No one declares the end of the trials. There's no decree, no official closure. But when the next accusation comes, a traveler muttering about a girl with strange dreams, the town elder nods politely, thanks him, and sends him on his way with a loaf of bread. No trial, just breakfast. Historians still argue whether this was the beginning of modern skepticism or just a village regaining its voice. Some call it recovery, others denial. But one thing is certain. The people stopped listening to whispers and started listening to each other. Spring edges into Trier almost apologetically. The snow melts reluctantly, dribbling into gutters, seeping through cobblestones. Buds appear on the bare branches, first unnoticed, then undeniable. And with the thaw comes something else: letters. This time, they come not from bishops or barons, but from townspeople in other regions. Towns that heard about the quiet ending of the fires, about the prince bishop who stopped calling names, about a girl who vanished and left behind a trail of spirals. They write cautiously but clearly. What changed? Is it safe? Are we allowed to question again? Johann reads them all. He doesn't answer any, but he begins walking the town each morning. No guards, no robes, just a cane and a slight limp you hadn't noticed before. People nod. He nods back. They don't bow, and he doesn't expect them to. One day he passes Jacob the blacksmith, who once dared speak up, and the two men pause, just long enough to meet each other's eyes. Nothing is said, but something is understood. Mainstream historical fact. After the peak of witch hunting in Germany, several towns and cities took it upon themselves to quietly bury or forget their roles. They never admitted fault, but records were hidden, relics discarded, and silence became a form of collective forgiveness. Back in the castle, the tribunal chamber is converted. The desks are removed, the racks dismantled, the confession books, what's left of them, are boxed up and locked away. The spiral stones, curiously, are not destroyed. They're given to Father Byrne, who stores them in a small box beneath the chapel stairs. They're just shapes, he says aloud once, but then again, so is the cross. Ulrich retires soon after. He leaves with no ceremony, no farewell. He simply walks out one morning, saddlebag slung over one shoulder, and rides toward the southern hills. No one stops him. Quirky tidbit. A few former inquisitors from this era reappeared years later in entirely different professions, some as teachers, some as city clerks. One became a brewer. None, it seems, wanted to be remembered. As for the children, they grow. Rosa is never confirmed to have returned, but drawings begin to appear on the chapel walls, small ones hidden behind pews, spirals, circles, flowers, a bird in flight. No one admits to making them. No one erases them either. One evening, a traveling musician arrives in Trier. She plays a soft, circular melody on a wooden flute. The children hum along instinctively. The tune is unfamiliar, but it makes them feel known. That night, the musician disappears, leaves before dawn. But the tune remains. Johann listens to it from his chamber. He says nothing, just watches the trees sway from his window. Historians still argue what led him to stop. Some say it was the letter from Mainz. Others cite the silence of the townspeople, or Rosa's escape, or Lisa's eyes, or perhaps, just perhaps, it was the sound of too many children humming the same forgotten lullaby. Whatever the reason, the trials didn't end with an edict. They ended with absence. No more ropes, no more flames, no more lists, just the wind shifting direction, and a man who finally closed the book. The fields outside Trier are green again. New growth, stubborn and soft, pushes through last season's frozen ground. Sheep graze, children chase each other past fences, and, somewhere beneath the soil, the ashes of old fires sleep undisturbed. You walk beyond the town walls where the air is cleaner and the sky wider. A stone marker rests near the edge of the woods, a squat weather-worn thing with no name, no date, just a spiral carved into its face. It wasn't placed by the church, or the tribunal, or any official hand. It simply appeared one night, and no one removed it. People leave things there now. Ribbons, bread crusts, a feather, a folded note, a pebble in the shape of a heart. Mainstream historical fact. After the witch trials faded, many communities created informal spaces of remembrance. Not graveyards, those were often denied to the accused, but corners of fields, forest glades, stones marked with secret symbols, places where grief could quietly breathe. Back in Trier, the tribunal chamber is now a hall for town meetings. No banners hang there, no portraits, just long benches and open windows. People gather to debate crop taxes, road repairs, school hours. During one such meeting, someone mentions midwife shortages. Perhaps it's time to start teaching again, says a woman near the back. No one laughs, no one scoffs. A few heads nod. A committee is formed. Later that week, a traveling herbalist named Marga arrives. She claims no titles, offers no certificates, just herbs, teas, and stories. She is invited to stay. Johann no longer attends these meetings, but he hears about them. From clerks, from merchants, from the children who now carry news better than letters. He listens. He walks. He writes in the margins of old books. And sometimes when he thinks no one is looking, he hums. Quirky tidbit. One letter from 1592 describes an anonymous clergyman humming lullabies in the rhythm of a spiral, which his listeners did not recognize. Some folklorists speculate it may have been an echo of lost chants once whispered by women like Hilda. On the first warm evening of the season, the town holds a quiet feast. Not a festival, no fireworks, just bread stew music. Tables set down the middle of the street, lanterns strung between windows. The fire is lit, but only for warmth. Children dance around it, drawing spirals in the dirt with sticks. No one stops them. At one point, someone asks if they should say a prayer for the lost. But the wind picks up, and the spiral stone outside town seems to shimmer. And that feels like enough. Historians still argue how much of this actually happened. Some say the spiral markers were just local myths. Others say the trials ended not with conscience, but with cost. That fear didn't vanish, it just moved deeper into the roots. But the stories remain. The girl who vanished, the teacher who corrected grammar under torture, the midwife who drew sons, and the prince who watched it all and one day simply stopped. Summer settles over Trier with a lazy grace. The river runs full and clear, the cobbled streets warm underfoot. The market hums with quiet happiness, nothing grand, nothing loud, just a kind of steady breathing peace. The town is not healed, but it's healing. You walk through the alley behind the old tribunal hall and find something peculiar children drawing with chalk. Not just spirals now. Birds, trees, eyes, stars, some symbols you don't recognize at all. One girl draws two hands cupped around a flame, then carefully wipes half of it away. She smiles at no one in particular. Inside the tribunal, now a town hall, the spiral stone from outside the city has been quietly moved to the corner of the chamber. No one explains it. It just appeared one morning placed beside a bowl of wildflowers and a folded cloth bundle containing a red thread. No one touches it. No one removes it. They understand. Mainstream historical fact. In the generations following the witch trials, Trier gradually became a center of legal reform. The same region that once led Germany in executions began to question evidence more rigorously. Some clerics even preached sermons on the dangers of collective fear without naming names. Johann's days have become predictable. A walk in the morning, a quiet reading of scripture. Occasionally, he visits the chapel where he sits in the very back and says nothing. Sometimes Father Byrne joins him. They never speak during those visits, just sit in shared silence. One day, Johann asks to see the list. Not a list, the list. The final registry of those executed under his rule. A clerk brings it to him, bound in dark leather, its pages worn at the edges. Johann doesn't open it immediately. He stares at it for a long while, then runs his fingers over the spine. Then he opens to the first name, reads it aloud. Then the second, and the third. One by one through the morning and into the late afternoon, Johann reads the names. Just the names. Nothing else. No charges, no judgments. Just names. A clerk offers to help. He declines. He reads all of them. When he finishes, he closes the book and whispers, "They deserved more." Quirky tidbit. In at least one known case in 17th century Germany, a local magistrate commissioned a bell to be cast using melted iron from the instruments of torture. It was rung once a year without announcement on the anniversary of the final execution. Johann walks the town less frequently now. His hair has gone silver. His steps are slower, but when people pass him, they don't look away. They look at him. Some nod. Some say nothing. But no one spits. No one shouts. They know. He knows. One morning, a girl approaches him at the edge of the marketplace. She's maybe 9. Red thread tied around her wrist. She says nothing. Just hands him a pebble, a spiral etched into its side. He takes it, nods, says only thank you. And that's it. Historians will one day try to make sense of Johann's later years. Some will call it penance, others cowardice. Some will say he should have burned with the books. Others will say he kept the fire from returning. But those who lived through it, they'll remember the way he read the names, aloud, one by one. In the square, children chase geese. The baker sells honey cakes again. And in the chapel, a new altar cloth has been sewn, not embroidered with saints or angels. Just a spiral. White thread on white linen. Subtle, but present. The castle looms less now. It's still there, of course, stone and shadow, perched above Trier like a memory you can't quite forget. But the doors are open more often. The guards lean less stiffly. The windows catch more sun. It's still a seat of power, but it no longer growls. It watches. Inside, Johann begins to clean. Not with broom or rag, but with pages. He's been sorting through the remnants of his tribunal, not just the trial books and ledgers, but letters, anonymous complaints, witness lists, marginal notes like sings too much or owns red cloak, the kinds of details that once ended lives. Now they fill the fireplace. He burns them slowly, one sheet at a time, not in piles, not all at once, just enough to watch each name vanish. You sit with him as a document curls and darkens, the ink dissolving into ash. I remember this one. Johann murmurs. She was accused because her cat licked her fingers. He shakes his head not in rage or disbelief, but in mourning. The mourning of someone who knows he cannot go back. Only forward. Mainstream historical fact. While most German witch trial records were preserved in court archives, others were deliberately destroyed by the very people who had commissioned them. Whether out of guilt, fear of future judgment, or attempts to control historical memory, the disappearance of documents became its own kind of confession. That afternoon, a group of local women arrive at the tribunal. They've been invited, not summoned. They're here to discuss rebuilding the city's healing guild. They bring herbs, journals, tea blends, recipes stitched into linen. None of them are called witches. They are called wise. Johann meets with them briefly, not to approve, just to listen. When they ask if they can use the old tribunal hall for lessons, he says yes, but then adds use the east windows. Let in the light. Quirky tidbit. Some post-trial communities transformed former places of judgment into places of teaching, especially for women. A tribunal in Rothenburg was converted into a herbarium. Another into a sanctuary school where girls learned music, Latin, and medicine. That night, Johann walks alone through the lower chapel. He passes the place where confessions were once extracted, where decisions were once whispered between candlelight and cruelty. He stops and kneels. There's no liturgy, no chant, just silence, and a single word, forgive. It echoes not in the chamber, but inside him, and perhaps faintly beyond him too. The next morning, Jacob the blacksmith erects a post in the square, not for hanging, for messages. Notes begin to appear. She helped deliver my son. He gave me herbs for fever. They were good. It becomes a wall of memory, a wall of resistance, and eventually a wall of learning. Children write there now, not just names, stories. Rosa's is among them. No one knows who wrote it, but the paper is tied with red thread. Johann reads each one. He posts one of his own. I listened to fear instead of music. I mistook silence for order. I failed. He signs it J. von der Leyen, not Prince Bishop, just a name. Historians still argue whether his final years were noble, pathetic, or somewhere in between, but they agree on this: no more names were added to the trial ledger after the year Rosa disappeared. No more trials, no more fires, just names and notes and thread. Autumn rolls into Trier like a whisper. The wind carries the scent of baked apples, drying herbs, and wood smoke, not the acrid kind that once meant burning flesh, but the gentle smoke of hearth fires, meals' warmth. There are still shadows, yes, but they are softer now, tired maybe, or just less hungry. You walk past the tribunal hall, no longer called that. The townspeople refer to it now as the Common House. Its doors remain open during the day. A girl teaches numbers there in the morning. A healer teaches poultices in the afternoon. And in the evenings, people gather around the long tables to speak, to eat, and to remember. On one of the stone columns inside, someone has etched a spiral, small, delicate, barely noticeable unless the sunlight catches it just so. No one removes it. Back in the castle, Johann writes again. Not orders, not summons, just reflections. His handwriting has changed, less angular, more open. He writes in second person, sometimes addressing ghosts. He writes letters that will never be sent. To Lise, I still hear your song when the wind passes the south window. To Betts, I corrected your Latin once. You were right. To Hilda, you never needed fire to be remembered. Mainstream historical fact. In rare but recorded cases, former witch hunters kept private journals detailing their regrets. These writings were often never published, but were sometimes found in estate records or monastery archives. In them, many sought peace not from others, but from themselves. Ulrich sends one last letter. It arrives in late October. He writes from a monastery tucked into a mountainside. He teaches novices now, says he rarely speaks of the past, but sometimes late at night he walks into the woods and draws spirals with his boot in the frost. He closes the letter with, "There are names I'll never forget, but I am learning to speak them with reverence, not fear." Johann holds the letter for a long time, then places it beside Rosa's spiral stone on his desk. That night, something curious happens. A dream. Not one filled with fire or crying or Latin chants, but of a river. Calm. Moonlit. A girl in red standing at the far bank, not speaking. Just watching. Behind her, the faint outline of others. A teacher with a book. A woman with herbs in her hand. A cat curled at their feet. Johann wakes before dawn, and for the first time in many years, he smiles. Not because he believes it was real, but because he finally knows it doesn't matter. The story is no longer his to control. It belongs to the town now. The mothers, the daughters, the stone carvers and bread bakers, the children tracing spirals into the dust with their fingertips. Quirky tidbit. In some rural German churches centuries after the trials, mothers would trace spiral patterns on their babies' foreheads before baptisms. The practice faded eventually, but not before one bishop, confused by the symbol, described it as a mark against forgetting. At the edge of town, near the field where Hilda's grave was never allowed, someone has planted rosemary. Just a few sprigs, no sign, but everyone knows what it means. You pause there, breathe in the scent, and listen. No screams, no chants, just wind through branches and children laughing somewhere just beyond the trees. Winter returns with a softer hand this year. The wind comes early, yes, but without malice. The rooftops frost gently. The marketplace doesn't close, and the people of Trier begin preparing for something they've never truly had before: a peaceful winter. In the square, a new tradition begins. No one planned it. No one announced it. But on the anniversary of Lisa's death, the people gather, quietly. No sermons, no flames, just candles, one for each person lost during the trials. They place them around the spiral marker at the center of town, the one Jacob carved and set into the stone, once the site of public executions. Now it glows, not brightly, not triumphantly, just enough to make the shadows look gentler. You stand among them watching. No one reads names aloud this time. That was Johann's burden. The people simply stand, heads bowed, hands clasped, and eyes closed. Some pray, some weep, most simply breathe. And for the first time in many years, the square is not a place of fear, but of memory. Mainstream historical fact. After the end of the Trier witch hunts, there is no record of any official memorial or apology, but folk traditions emerged modest symbolic rituals practiced by the survivors and their descendants. Many involved light thread or silence. Nearly all avoided direct confrontation. The memory of what happened was too fresh to name. Back in his room, Johann watches from the window. He does not go down. He doesn't need to. He's done enough walking among the ruins. What he sees below is not his to lead. But later that evening, when the square has cleared and the candles are beginning to gutter in the cold wind, he does step outside. He walks slowly. No guards, no clerics, just a coat and a cane. He kneels beside the spiral stone. Leaves no wreath, no book, just a single folded slip of paper. You peek at it before the wind carries it off. 5 words. I remember, I still listen. Quirky tidbit. In the 17th century, scribes often left small marginal notes in prayer books and ledgers, personal private reflections. Some historians believe the phrase, "I still listen," appears in at least 2 such books in Trier, written by anonymous hands long after the fire stopped. That night, a strange hush settles over the city. Not fear, not dread, just quiet. A kind of collective exhale. People sleep soundly. Dreams come without nightmares. And in one small cottage near the Orchard Road, a little girl whispers to her mother, "Tell me the story about the girl in red." And the mother does. She tells it gently, with pauses, with care. And at the end, the girl asks, "Did she win?" The mother smiles. No one wins, but sometimes people remember. And remembering, that's a kind of victory. In the chapel, the altar cloth is changed for winter. The white spiral thread still remains, now embroidered with a small gold sun in the corner. Just a touch, but enough. And on the snow-covered fence outside the old tribunal, a new drawing appears, scrawled in soot and chalk by unseen hands. It's not a spiral. It's a tree. Its roots twist in loops. Its trunk is wrapped in thread, and at its highest branch sits a bird red as flame. The snow thickens in December, curling around chimney stacks and muffling the sound of footsteps. It's the kind of winter that makes everything slower, speech, memory, even grief. Trier walks softly now. The streets are full, but not frantic. The cold has teeth, but it bites with restraint. You drift past the orphanage where children press their fingers against the frosted windows. Inside, Sister Agnes reads by candlelight. On her lap is a book, not scripture, not law. It's a collection of lullabies. Old ones no longer whispered in fear. One verse catches your ear. Spiral sun and circle moon, dreamer rise and sing your tune. Wind won't catch what knows no name. Sleep now, child, forget the flame. The melody is unfamiliar, but you know it came from somewhere that mattered. Mainstream historical fact. Some of the earliest modern lullabies in Germany show curious similarities to chants and rhythmic poems once associated with pre-Christian rituals. While the church once condemned them, many persisted, folded into motherhood and memory, like embers in ash. That evening, Johann walks the castle halls with a small lantern. He carries no staff, no seal, no parchment, just silence and thought. He pauses by the stairwell where the tribunal guards once stood and touches the wall. The hooks are gone now. The torches replaced with glass lamps. He walks down the long corridor to the room that once held the interrogation bench. It's different now, clean used for storage. But in the corner, one of Hilda's stones remains. Not displayed, just there. He picks it up. It's cool in his hand. And smooth as memory. Outside, the children have built a snow figure, not a man, but a woman in a long cloak, arms raised. A red scarf is tied around her waist. One child adds a crown of dried herbs. They call her Mother Spiral. No one corrects them. Quirky tidbit. Folk records from the 1600s describe snow mothers built by children during midwinter festivals, figures of women wrapped in red thread or adorned with broomsticks and clay spirals. These rituals were never officially sanctioned, but they endured quietly for centuries. Back inside the town hall, the final scroll is unrolled. It contains a record of those lost, each name entered with care, each date written in smaller script. This time, the clerk does not write cause of death. He simply leaves the space blank. There's no need to say it. They were taken. That's enough. Johann signs the bottom not with a flourish, but with a single line. Let no more names follow, no title, just that. In the chapel that night, the spiral cloth is laid with candles, one for each name. Some flicker out early, others burn all night, but all of them shine if only for a little while. And beside the altar sits a girl, new to town, no one knows her well. She hums something soft, fingers tracing loops in the wax pooling at her feet. She doesn't know Lisa's name, or Hilda's, or Betts's, but she's humming their song anyway. Historians still debate the true legacy of Johann's final years. Some say he faded into obscurity. Others say he shaped a quieter revolution. But in the town of Trier, no child is taught about the witch trials with pride, only with pause and the smallest touch of awe, because they lived and were remembered, and because even now in the darkest season there are people who still draw spirals into snow and wait for spring. The last day of winter comes without announcement. No trumpet of warmth, no sudden sunburst, just a slightly gentler breeze, the kind that whispers promises without dates. The frost remains on rooftops, but it's thin now and hesitant, like it knows its time is nearly over. You walk the streets of Trier one more time. The town feels different, not because it's changed completely, but because the weight has shifted. The silence isn't thick anymore. It's full, rich. The kind of silence that comes after a long story has been told, and everyone is sitting with the ending. Children chase each other near the old square. Not a single one of them looks at the place where the scaffold once stood. Or maybe they do, but without knowing what it meant. Just a patch of stone that warms quicker than the rest. In the chapel, the candles are still burning from the night before. Some have burned low, some have spilled over, but all have left marks, little wax rings, each one different, each one whole. Father Byrne walks among them, snuffing each one with care like punctuation. He hums as he works. It's a lullaby you've heard before. The Spiral Song. Johann stands by the door. He does not enter. He just watches. Mainstream historical fact. The Trier witch trials officially ceased around 1593, though sporadic accusations lingered in neighboring regions for decades. What changed in Trier, most scholars agree, was not just leadership, but local will. Fear exhausted itself. People remembered how to speak, and in time how to refuse. That morning, the town's children are gathered in the common house. They're drawing again. Spirals, of course, but now also trees. Bird suns with far too many rays. Some draw red threads across their pages, looping from corner to corner. No one tells them to stop. A girl asks, "Can I tell a story?" The teacher smiles. "Yes, any story you like." And she begins. It's not the tale of Rosa or Betts or Lisa. It's a new one. But you hear echoes in her voice, the same rhythm, the same pause when truth outweighs fiction. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, children were encouraged to tell stories of the past, in circles weaving red thread between them as they spoke. This practice, once dismissed as superstition, is now understood by folklorists as a tool for collective memory in post-trauma communities. Outside, a slow flurry begins. It's not harsh. It's not cold. Just a soft reminder that winter, like sorrow, leaves in stages. Johann sits in his study. His desk is bare now. No scrolls, no stones, no ledgers. Just one object, the spiral stone Rosa left behind. He turns it in his hand one last time, then sets it on the windowsill. He leaves the room, doesn't lock the door, doesn't look back. And across town in the common house, a spiral is stitched into the hem of the new tablecloth. Just one. White thread. No label. No need. Historians still argue how many died, how many lived, how many names were lost to flame and ink. But the people of Trier remember the ones they can. They write songs. They tie ribbons. They tell children the truth wrapped gently in rhyme. And every spring, without fail, they gather. No monument, just a fire for warmth. And a story for peace. So now you exhale, gently, as if letting go of a breath that's been held for far too long. The story's end doesn't come with a clang or a cry. It doesn't ask for applause or forgiveness. It just settles. Like snow drifting onto the shoulders of old stone. Like a page turned slowly so as not to wake the house. You're still here, blanket around your shoulders, maybe a dim lamp still glowing nearby. Maybe your tea has gone cold. That's all right. Some stories need time to cool before they're understood. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the square. No gallows, No fire, just the faint imprint of footsteps and the laughter of children echoing down cobbled streets. Picture the red thread stretched from hand to hand. Picture the spiral, drawn not with fear anymore, but with care, with memory. That girl in the red cloak, the one who disappeared, maybe she lived. Maybe she became someone new. Or maybe she became the song itself, passed from breath to breath until no one remembered the words, only the feeling. Let your thoughts spiral too, not downward, not lost, just gently inward, like ink swirling through water. Sleep is like that, a slow dissolve. And now you can rest. No more flames, no more names, just quiet, and the soft sound of wind brushing through threadpaper stone. Good night.